Clemson's secondary is in for a big battle against Louisville tonight. We'll talk about it right here on Locked On Clemson.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Tiger fans? Morgan Thomas here, Clemson fan, Clemson grad, host and producer of Locked On Clemson, part-time host and producer over on 105.5 FM The Roar. Thank you so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen of the day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. And big salute out there to the everydayers who stick with us. You know how we do it here on Locked On. Exclusive Clemson content Monday through Friday every single week. And if you're new to the show, about 70% of you are not yet subscribed. So what are you waiting for? Make sure you get in there, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode and you can stick with us throughout the rest of the season. Tonight, we're talking about Clemson's secondary against one of the most productive receivers, and also getting into what Clemson did versus FSU. Can they keep that going? And then finally finishing it up in segment 3, talking about the ground threat or lack thereof for the Clemson Tigers. But let's get straight into it. The most terrifying matchup for tonight's matchup, Clemson versus Louisville, is going to be that bottom 100th something ranked pass defense. You know what I'm talking about. The linebackers that are lost in coverage, the nickelback that's lost in coverage, the secondary, the cornerbacks that are lost in coverage, the safeties that don't have the speed or the length and get lost in coverage. Everybody gets lost in coverage. Clemson's 100-something ranked pass defense is no bueno, no good against one of the better, more physical wide receivers in the league. And Louisville is going to have to test or rely on this wide receiver much more, because from what we're hearing now is, remember that typo I said about Isaac Brown and not being injured? Well, now we're hearing more reports that he's actually not going to play tonight. So when you hear that, you're looking at who could be the guy that Louisville will lean on in this scenario. And that would be their leading wide receiver, Chris Bell. Top 3 in the ACC in catches, top 3 in the ACC in yards. This could be a big shootout, or it could be a big shutdown, or it could be what we hate it to be, what we don't really want it to be, and it could be a big-time embarrassment for Clemson's secondary. How broken or how fixed is it coming into this game? Well, Clemson's given up around 250 passing yards a game, bottom 3rd nationally. And while you have Chris Bell out there, the last 3 games have been a little bit more quiet for him. But earlier in the season, he was on an All-American pace, and he could get back into that, rhythm against a defense that, you really can't have a lot of faith in. Now, the good thing is there's one guy that you probably can have more faith in, and that is Avieon Terrell. He's playing top-level football this season. So it would seem to me the best solution is to match up Chris Bell with Avieon Terrell, who is one of the better-ranked cornerbacks according to Pro Football Focus, has over 500-plus snaps, and is a guy that the coaching staff truly trusts to follow through with the play calls that are there. Now, the problem with Avieon Terrell is that there's not a problem. I think that he could go up against Bell. Bell 6'2", 220. He is hard and difficult to guard in slants. He's difficult to guard across the middle. He's also very good on the back shoulder throws. But Avieon Terrell, I would expect him to go toe-to-toe. And I'm not really worried so much there. The worry that I have is with the rest of the guys around Avieon Terrell. I don't expect him to have a bust, but what if they call something where he's not matched up? What if they call something where he's in a zone that only limits him to a certain part of the field? What if, like with the Duke game, they call something to where he is blitzing, because we know one of the biggest problems with this Clemson defense is they can't get any kind of pressure at all in the backfield without sending 6 or more players, which is a nightmare for your coverage. So even if cornerback 1, CB1, DB1, whatever you want to say, Avieon Terrell is able to go match up toe-to-toe with him man-to-man or toe-to-toe with him in the zone, what if that's not the case? If I'm Louisville, I'm motioning him around. I'm trying to get him out of Avieon Terrell's sight. I'm trying to get him out of his zone, out of his one-on-one, and open him up against the other guys for Clemson. That's what I worry about a little bit more. Those safeties, they've got eyes in the backfield more often than not. Now, we've been told Florida State, was a turning point for this team. They're kind of making those adjustments. Those linebackers losing coverage, losing containment, losing their man, and passing across zone, crossers across the field, losing their guys. The cornerbacks having good coverage in the flats, but not over the top with the safeties. Louisville, to me, is going to do a lot of play action shots, a lot of crossing routes, and a lot of motion to get Chris Bell in and away from Avieon Terrell. And that's where Clemson has been more vulnerable. So I'm not as worried about Terrell as I am about the other 10 guys. Well, maybe not all 10, but the other 4 or 5 guys that will be in coverage. If this game becomes some sort of shootout, which it very well could be, then the safeties have got to step up for Clemson. Louisville will try whatever they can to stress out Clemson's secondary. And if you're anybody facing up against Clemson, that's what you want. You want to stress them out as much as you can in the passing game because they just have not been able to rise to the occasion. Could Florida State have been really a change? How can Clemson avoid getting embarrassed on Friday night? Because eyes are going to be on this game. And, it's kind of like that marquee night game on an off day, on a short week. What can Tom Allen do? Well, maybe he keeps Avieon Terrell against him, doesn't allow him to get involved in other ways. Maybe he kind of keeps it simple, less rotating calls for Avieon, make him just ISO Chris Bell and hey, that's the guy you got to play against. Fewer coverage changes for Terrell, lock him in on Bell the entire time, lean in on Avieon Terrell to lock down Bell to where someone else out there has to just, hurt you. And to me, if you take away the best guy for Miller Moss, I kind of lean in on the fact that Miller Moss is not going to be able to rise to the occasion. I said this yesterday about what quarterback is going to rise to the occasion. What quarterback can you count on more than the rest or than the other? And I do believe that you can count on Cade Klubnik more than you can with anybody else, especially with Miller Moss in this scenario. So for me, I say keep it simple. Keep it simple. Have Avieon Terrell hold his own and lock down Chris Bell. Keep Clemson alive. Keep Clemson's hopes alive to get into that bowl game. They have to win 2 out of the last 3 to become bowl eligible. It's not going to be easy if you allow Chris Bell to run free, get open with nobody around him. It's going to be bad news. I mean, we have seen that with other receivers this season, and you just can't do that with this guy. So if you do allow that, that's going to create a very long Friday night for us, and I'm just hoping not. So they don't have a ton of weapons, in my opinion. Clemson has enough talent to lock them down, and especially without their star running back, this is the moment where you can capitalize on that. One less superstar to worry about. Let Cade do what he needs to do on the other end. Lock down Bell on your end. And I think you will kind of start to see that maybe Florida State was turning the corner. Speaking of that, we'll talk about, was it turning the corner or was it just a foggy one-off in segment 2 here on Locked on Clemson. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered the most. Let's break it down. I'm going to give my shout out to Cade Klubnik. He hasn't had the best season overall, but against Florida State, 20 for 27, 221 yards total, and 1 touchdown. He was able to keep the offense moving, and he did scan the field much better than he has in the past, relying on some big-time plays from Antonio Williams, who was 6 receptions for 62 yards and 1 touchdown. And just like Cade Klubnik delivered for Clemson last week, DoorDash delivers on your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. Save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. Clemson got 6 sacks against Florida State. They only allowed 10 points, blanked them in the first quarter and in the third quarter. You do stuff like that, you start to feel like, hey, this defense has figured it out. But then you look at Florida State being 4-5 overall, 1-5 in the ACC. Clemson 4-5 overall, 3-4 in the ACC. And you really feel like both these teams are just not that good of teams. It just happened to be that Florida State was the worst team compared to both. When you look at the team stats, Florida State had more first downs, more passing yards, more total yards, more rushing yards, but they had more turnovers as well. So could it be that the 6 sacks and the 10 points allowed, could it be that it's the old defense with real growth and a turning point against Florida State? Or could it be that Florida State was still enjoying Halloween and handing out a bunch of gifts and candy, maybe it was Halloween, maybe like this is Christmas? Maybe it's just a one-off instead of turning the corner. Being able to string more games together like this could be an indication that this team has figured something out a little bit better. Tom Allen's play calling seems to be fitting a little bit better as we continue this season going on. We thought it would be less painful than it has been, but the defensive play calling looked much better against Florida State. We saw a lot of really grounded through him as well and making his decisions. And also, you couldn't help to think that the good luck charm of Brent Venables was on the sideline as well. I don't know how Oklahoma fans feel about that, but Brent Venables had his Clemson gear on, so it was kind of cool to see him there. Maybe he brought a good luck charm. Maybe he brought some sort of change to this team. I don't know, but it did look like a Clemson defense that you wanted to see as far as bending and not breaking. They locked them down in the red zone, stopped them from scoring for 2 quarters, only held them to a field goal in the fourth quarter, and really just 1 touchdown overall for Florida State. But there's still some concerns when you see those sacks there. 1 sack was kind of a fluke sack. Avieon Terrell barely touched the guy and he fell down. Another one was a good one from him. Jaheim Lawson, I believe, also had one. But what we're seeing from the defense is that they've got to bring 6 or more to get any kind of pressure and get those sacks. And, that puts some stress on your secondary. So that's why I'm still kind of skeptical of if this team's really, truly turned the corner, considering the success they had against Florida State. Sammy Brown had a sack. Jeremiah Alexander had a sack. Avieon Terrell had 2. Will Helt had 1. And Kobe McLeod had 1. All the linebackers, I mean, literally every linebacker had a sack, which shows me that it's still not coming from that front pressure. It's coming from the additional add-on guys that are having to get in there and get to the quarterback, which is fine if you only need to send 5, but considering you're having to send 6 or more, that's where the stress comes in. Can Peter Woods and TJ Parker and the front 4 really get to it? We're still not seeing that at all. Peter Woods only had 2 tackles last game against Florida State. TJ Parker only had 1 tackle. They're not showing up at all. And that's the biggest frustration for me is I can't truly say that this defense has turned any sort of corners until the defensive line steps up. Now, they're going to be without Stephylan Green. He was listed as out this game, but you're still going to have Devontae Capehart. We'll have to see what happens with Amari Adams. Maybe he gets in the mix as well. But he didn't get on the stat sheet last weekend either. So there's a lot of skepticism for me still. Florida State also, even with all of that, the 10 points is deceiving because they dropped some wide open passes. And not only wide open, but if they were caught, they would have had all kinds of room to get even into the end zone or make it a huge play. You start allowing that against Louisville or any other opponent, or even Florida State, that game could have went completely different. QB in Tommy Castellanos didn't really have a great game at all. And it really, to me, wasn't much due to the defense. I think Florida State's just a bad team. And so that's why I'm not willing yet to say that Clemson has truly turned the corner. Now, Dabo came out and said that communication had gotten better, but there's still those busts out there that thankfully against Florida State went unpunished. But they were punished against Syracuse. They were punished against Louisville, punished against Georgia Tech, punished against Duke. So to me, that's why I still lean on the fact that Florida State was a one-off. Louisville is going to test the exact same weakness that Clemson had against Florida State. If Clemson hasn't truly fixed it, we're going to find out pretty quick. Jeff Brom is going to attack the perimeter. He's going to attack the middle of the field. He's going to find ways to create conflict with the safeties. And that's really been a concern for me with Clemson since week 1, or I guess you could say maybe week 0. No, it was week 1. But the defensive front, we've seen for sure, cannot get any pressure or enough pressure to really relieve anything from the secondary. 6 sacks were great, but it wasn't from the defensive front. It was really from your linebackers and your cornerback. Can you afford to do that again? Maybe you can. When the rush doesn't get home, though, everything else is stressed out, and that's what causes everything in the secondary. That's what causes those 20 and 30-yard chunk plays. Could it have been a turning point? Yes, it could have been. It also could have been equally an illusion, and I'm going to lean on the fact that the Florida State game was an illusion for the defense. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll be happy to say I am, but I don't believe so. FSU's performance was just an illusion. If Clemson can win this game, they've got to prove that they've actually fixed it, and it wasn't just FSU. Florida State's going to show, or the Louisville game tonight is going to be very quick on whether or not this team, what truth is with this team and what is exposed. I truly believe that this is one of those games, considering the opponent, and considering it's a home game, it's a road game for Clemson. This is one of those games that if Clemson gets down by 2 scores in the first half, I think Clemson's going to struggle to keep up. I really do. Clemson also has another thing that we need to figure out, and that is, are they actually a good running team? They're not. They're not. But can they be tonight? Well, we'll talk about it in segment 3 right here on Locked on Clemson. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And you know I love going over to the research site at FanDuel.com. You can check that out to help out and make an educated decision on what you can do. Right now, over on FanDuel, they're giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head over to FanDuel.com and sign up. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. When you look at Clemson's rushing attack versus Florida State, Adam Randall, 15 carries, 48 yards. Not good enough. No touchdowns. Gideon Davidson, 10 carries, 39 yards. A little bit better, but not good enough. Peter Woods got a converted fourth down. Antonio Williams had 2 for 5. Not good. Cade Klubnik, non-existent as well. This rushing game is on fumes at this point. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the offensive line is just absolutely garbage when it comes to the run blocking. They're just not good at it. Can they make something out of nothing? Can they turn any last bit to get to the finish line here with the end of the season coming up and ride it out on the fumes that they're on? Because the rushing attack is getting worse. Clemson's running game is broken. It's not explosive. They're trying things with Gideon Davidson, but even when he's out there, he has limited amount of touches, and he's not just really amazing either. Florida State, though, did allow a couple of chunk plays, which was good, kept the team moving, but 24 points. Stanford had 20 points against Florida State. Every other opponent against Florida State, when you look at it, seemed like they could score better than Clemson. So 24 points is not good. Limiting them to 10 is great. Winning the game by two scores is great. Only 98 yards rushing, still a broken running attack. Now, Adam Randall is doing all he can. He runs hard. He breaks tackles when he can. He rarely has tackles for loss. Honestly, I think he does better than even Phil Maffa did in the tackles for loss. He does pretty good at least getting some forward yardage. My biggest gripe with Phil Maffa was that it seemed like he would fall behind the line of scrimmage. But right when he got to any kind of resistance, he would fall over. I don't see that with Adam Randall, but there's no home run threat there. There's really not a home run threat with Gideon Davidson right now. The backfield is just not scaring anybody. Clemson's longest runs often seem to be 8 yards. Rarely are they popping for 20 or more. And can they win the game if that's all they got? It's going to be very hard for sure. Louisville is going to try to choke Clemson's run game out early and make them one-dimensional, and they're going to want Cade to throw the ball a ton. You know, I would say getting Cade up into that 40 and 50 passing mark would be great for Louisville. The more Cade throws the ball, the worse he does, it seems like statistically. Making him more predictable is exactly what they'll want to do. They'll want Garrett Riley to panic. And when Garrett Riley panics, they go more conservative, and they also go away from the running game. So the more that you can limit them, that's exactly what LSU did. The more that you can limit them into one type of game plan, the more predictable they become. Without a running game, that's predictable. Honestly, the better teams out there establish the run really, really well. When you look at Texas A&M, they establish the run really well. Everything goes back to the run game and establishing that. And if they can't establish it, then they get stuck with the quick game, the quick passes, the screens, the short corner crossers, the quick outs. You know, those are going to require you to be more accurate, be more on time. And the problem is the defense can start sitting on those types of plays. They can start shrinking the field on you more and really force Cade Klubnik to be perfect. I don't want to force Cade Klubnik to be perfect. And so I'd like to see more balance, but can they even do it? Feels like that it's a tall task to even ask this team to have some sort of legit running game. I don't believe that you want to live 4 quarters with no running game, because then you get stuck in the same scenario that happened with Florida State. Third quarter, nothing but a field goal. Fourth quarter, nothing but a field goal. If you're in a shootout scenario, then you're right back to being stuck, kicking field goals when the other team's scoring touchdowns. Not a good recipe. Although I say all these things to say that Clemson still has a great chance to win this game. When you look at the spread, Clemson is actually not the favorite for tonight's game. Louisville's 55.3% according to ESPN Analytics. Louisville is just a 1.5 point favorite at home. That to me is a toss-up. I really believe Clemson has just as much of a chance to win this game as Louisville. Louisville's offense hasn't been as consistent as they used to be at the beginning of the season. The Tigers just need a little bit of a threat. They don't need 300 yards rushing. No. I don't even think they need 200-yard rushing. I'd like to see them go over 100. They can get close to 150. I think Clemson has a great chance. Randall gives you 80 yards. Gideon Davidson gets you 80. That gets you about 160. I love that. Just balance enough to be a threat. They don't need to be killing you with a running game. They just need to be functional to help Cade not have to play hero ball and throw 50 times, to help Garrett Riley not forget about the running game and throw 50 times, and to help the defense by staying on the field and winning the time of possession. Turnovers could be a big problem as well. One of the reasons why Clemson was able to win the Florida State game was not only Florida State mistakes, but also those turnovers. But again, Clemson doesn't have to dominate passing or rushing. They just have to be functional enough to be a threat, to have that balance there. That's all I'm saying. So would I pick Clemson? Give me Clemson plus the points. We already talked about it this week. Plus 1.5, I'll take it. Because this is a great kind of scenario, because Clemson is an away game as an underdog, and they've never been this way. It's been forever since Dabo Swinney's team's even been an underdog. I say embrace it. Play loose. Don't have to be perfect. Be functional in the run game. And be disciplined in your coverage on the defense. And I think you could walk away from Louisville, Kentucky and L&N Federal Credit Union Stadium with a big W, and relieve some stress on forcing yourself to win the South Carolina game just to be bowl eligible. All right. Hey, thank you so much for making Locked On Clemson your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out Locked On ACC on Kenton Gibbs and Alex Dono. They break down the most interesting conference and college sports, from the rivalries to the championships to every game in between. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And as always, Tiger fans, we'll see you not tomorrow, but we'll see you on Monday, and we'll see you at the top of the hill.